Hello, folks, and welcome to another Thursday Night Live with the boys of Soaring Profits, and a fantastic guest tonight. We are super thrilled to have Miss Krisdee Clark, Mrs. American. We have been graced with greatness before, but this, tops the cake. We met this lovely woman in Orlando, Florida.
What's their crowning achievement? Sorry, I had to throw that in.
She's probably got the tiara to crown it anyways, probably hiding in the closet somewhere there. But we met this beautiful woman down in Orlando at the Healthcare Amplified summit we were doing with all that gang. And we were really fortunate to have an opportunity to interview her there. And from that interview, we said to her, listen, we gotta get you back on kind of the long form, because her story is really, it's interesting. Kristy, you can tell us a little bit about it when you jump in here. But first of all, you Mrs. American, that's pretty top-notch stuff. You got to be pretty proud of yourself. But it's so much more than that. You've got such a really beautiful survivor story, this beautiful advocacy piece that you bring now to the table. Can you tell us a little bit of what that process would be when you get that tiara put on your head, that feeling, and then now the work that you're doing afterwards? What has that meant to your life?
Yeah. So first of all, thank y'all for having me on. I absolutely loved talking to y'all down there, and loved hearing the Canadian accent. So that was great. So, but
Whoa,
yeah,
hang on.
it was really
We've got accents. We've got
y'all.
Terrible. Yes. Process. I love it.
You can see why we liked her, folks.
We say process.
There you go. Right.
So, all right, back up. No, I'll throw in an A every now and then for you, so you know.
Just like home. Just make it like home for us.
There you go. There you go. So I am the former Mrs. American. I was Mrs. American all last year. It was absolutely amazing. It certainly was not something that it was ever on my radar. Even even growing up in the South. I'm from South Carolina. There's a lot of pageants here and a lot of pageant girls, but it wasn't something I ever did. I was a fast pitch softball player. I absolutely loved it. Just never really was on my radar to do something like this until I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2020. So 2020, kicks off, and I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. COVID is shutting everything down. And during that whole year, I decided that I had this platform that really needed to be out on a big stage. And that is really what led me to compete for Mrs. South Carolina. And then, God willing, I was crowned Mrs. American. So it was absolutely a phenomenal experience, and something I certainly was not expecting.
So I absolutely love that. Like, there's a couple of factors there. First of all, you're diagnosed with breast cancer. Must have been a fairly devastating point in your life. And so at Soaring Profits, we unveil the stories of champions, and your story is absolutely a story of champions. Because I've met other women who have survived breast cancer, and it's a very trying period. Instead of, pulling inward, feeling sorry for yourself, you start thinking about other people. Can you talk about how you would even think that? You would even do that? How would you move from, something that's so devastating for yourself and your family, to I want to help others, and I'm going to find the biggest platform that I can find, and I'm going to top that ladder and become an advocate? Like, how do you go from probably on your knees, dark period of time, to the highest point?
So that was really interesting. I'm diagnosed. I just found out that I didn't have the BRCA gene, which meant that it was an environmental thing. It did not come from my family, which was crazy to me. I mean, I didn't know. I knew of people that had breast cancer, but no one in my family. It was not something that was ever on my radar, especially as young as I was to be diagnosed. Right. I'm so thankful that I was diagnosed when I was, but I also was diagnosed, I'll say later, meaning that I had a slow growing cancer, but I was already stage 3 and it was already in 2 of my lymph nodes. So it was a crazy time. And I have 2 children at the time. They were 8 and 5. So there was a lot of, what do I do? But I think it was this moment that God just gave me internally where I just knew that I could not just stay where I was. I knew for myself that there had to be more to this, that I wasn't given this um, time of my life and being able to be a survivor if there wasn't something that I was supposed to do with it. And that's really what drove me. I started blogging, but I was blogging for myself at first. I wanted a way that I could update my family and friends on the process of what was going on in my journey, especially with it, COVID and everything shutting down. People couldn't come over, people couldn't come to the hospital, things like that. So I started my blog. And as I was doing that, I noticed so many women were reaching out to me and saying, I've been diagnosed, or I'm a survivor, or I've been just diagnosed. Can you tell me how you found your plastic surgeon? Or what did you use for chemo? And I started to realize that the answers that I could not find was the reason I was journaling. It was the reason I was blogging. I had no idea that that blog would go global, so much so that people from all over different countries were reaching out to me, and certainly all over the United States. I had people asking me so many questions, and that's really where that led me to
Wow.
then go on be Mrs. South Carolina with that platform. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I'll, do things locally. And then when I was crowned in Las Vegas as Mrs. American, it put me on this totally different trajectory, and one that I have no doubt that God placed me exactly where I needed to be. And it's just taken off from there.
Well, so
I
talk about
go
an
ahead.
amazing set of events that happens. Obviously, COVID shuts the world down. 95% of the world is very inward looking. Everyone's worried about, their own little cheese. How do you keep your day job? How do you keep everyone in your household? How do you keep everything normal? That's status quo. And you're dealt this blow. Like this comes down the pipe to you, and you're taking on all of those additional stresses and this. And then you're like, wow, I have this now opportunity to really reach out and help other people. That really does take a beautiful person to dive into that sort of thing. So
Oh, thank
now
you.
you've done more. Like you're jumping again. We met you at Healthcare Amplified. You're doing all of these speaking engagements. What sort of work has this led to?
It's been incredible. I have, let's see, one of the the biggest thing that I had done right after all this happened, I started writing a children's book. I knew I wanted to make sure that other children knew what it was like. And I wrote it from my children's perspective. It's my story, but it's kind of how I told them. I wanted moms and dads to have a way to talk to children, not only if it happens to them, but also if they have a grandparent that has cancer, whatever it is, it can be anything. But it was a way for children to sort of relate and understand what cancer is from their perspective and not from like a grown up perspective. So I started that. And then it led to me being the keynote speaker for Susan G. Komen at Advocacy Day, which was such an enormous opportunity that I was able to go and speak with them in Washington, D.C. And then on top of it, go up to the Capitol and talk with our senators and legislature there about breast cancer and the things that we need to have passed and bills that we need to have done in the United States. So it was absolutely a tremendous honor to have been asked and share my story there. But then it has led to lots of other things. I just got done speaking at Moms for America, which was down in Dallas at their 20th anniversary summit. I mean, it had some amazing people. I was so humbled to stand beside actors like Jim Caviezel and Kevin Sorbo, and it was incredible. So they were talking more on the political side of things. And I did talk about that and being a mom and schools here, but really about women's advocacy and why we're always talking about one thing as it pertains to women's health, and we're not talking about other things. I mean, it seems to be, at least here in the United States, anytime the political winds shift, we're talking about abortion for women's health. And I'm sitting here going, why are we only talking about this? What? There's so much more to women's health that we need to be addressing and talking about. I mean, there are women that do not get healthcare screenings and don't get mammograms because insurance doesn't pay for it. So we need to talk about different things, and being an advocate, having women's health is important, and having advocates for that. So it's led to that, and it's led now for me. I'm heading down in April, actually a couple weeks away. I'm heading down to Palm Beach, and I'm actually one of the speakers at a breakfast at President Donald Trump's house at Mar-a-Lago. So it has just blown up.
Christy, now you did say some names there that are definitely notable names. Like you had breakfast with Jesus.
I did. And that's what I said on stage. I was like, I'm standing on the same stage as Jesus.
That's pretty wild. Like that's pretty neat. And Kevin Sorbo is a very outspoken like free speech advocate, right? Like I these guys
Very
are
much.
two in my book, you know, great guys. But you bring up some political things there with that. Now, Donald Trump at the end of the week, what does that look like? How did you get involved with Donald Trump, and how did you get invited to Mar-a-Lago? And when can I come?
Yeah, I know, right? So it will actually be my second time at Mar-a-Lago. The first time I went was right after Healthcare Amplified, actually. And it was just incredible to be down there. I was just there as more of a spectator. I was invited and got to go to the Moms for America event at Mar-a-Lago. So that was incredible. And I got to meet the president then and spoke with him about women's health. I had a moment with him, which was absolutely amazing. Something I surely will cherish. And then was invited to come down for what's called America's First Club and speak this time now at Mar-a-Lago. And it really is. It's fascinating. It's absolutely a beautiful place. And it's neat to be able to talk not only from healthcare standpoint, but from a political standpoint. It's always been something that I've loved.
So 18 million for that place, do you think seems fair, or what do you think?
I think it might be a little bit higher.
Well, so give me a little bit of background. Again, this is not something that, you know, the average person watching here today is going to be able to say that they were down at Mar-a-Lago with the president, right? Like this is a really unique space and a really unique opportunity that you're getting. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what that feels like? And then is there any way, like, can you peel back the layer of what that looks like? I'm a little bit more, you know, right of center politically than James, a little bit more conservative that way. And I'm a Donnie fan. I don't mind Donnie. I think he's done a lot of really great things for the country. Now, he gets a lot of bad press. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of people, and women predominantly, don't like Trump. He made one grab you quote, and that was, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, his little locker room talk there. But you know, I think there's some stuff with that too that I think he got a bad rap with that, we'll say. But I've always loved him. I liked him before he was ever president. I used to always, so I'm in South Carolina. I'm not far from Florida. So I used to spend many of my spring and summers, especially spring, going down to spring training and watching the New York Mets and spring training. And so Mar-a-Lago is right there. So I used to drive by when it was just Donald Trump's house, you know, way before he was the president, and always thought that was really cool. I am definitely a conservative mom. And so, well, I'm a conservative woman, and then I'm lean towards a lot of conservative views as it pertains to my children now with so much going on in school systems. So that's how I really got involved with Moms for America. And I'm super proud to be a part of them and advocate for children and having more conservative type, we'll say, politics in the school board arena. So, you know, not having certain books in schools and things like that. So I do tend to lean towards that way.
Huh? I knew I liked her. She was going to be one of our favorites. I could tell right off the top.
And I'm a huge Trump fan. I loved him when he was president. I sat on this couch just right behind me and watched him as he left office and was so sad. And I knew that we had a long way to go as a country. I certainly did not think we would be where we are. But as a woman who also went through breast cancer and seeing what has occurred in women's health and women not being able to fund certain things and go, it really does all blend with each other. And so as far as peeling back the layers of that, speaking from that standpoint, then being asked to come and speak as a conservative mom, but also about women's health, it just led to these opportunities where I was then able to go somewhere like Mar-a-Lago, and that he just happened to be there that day, and he came in. We had a brief moment that we met and we talked. I was able to give him my business card, which was absolutely incredible. He stuck it in his pocket, and I'm like, how many times can you say the president of the United States took your business card? But it was absolutely wonderful. And he did. He took, you know, for bad raps or whatever anybody feels about him, I will tell you, he was very respectful, and he took a very long time to speak with me, look me straight in the eye, talk to me about women's health, talk to me about what was important. And it was absolutely humbling to be asked to come back and speak at his home.
Yeah, no, I think so. I am, like Pat said, more liberal than that, and I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump, but I understand there are a few things that he did right, and a lot of things he did wrong, and that's okay. But what you're doing, though, is women's health, children's rights, Moms for America, all of that stuff I can get behind, and I think all of that stuff we have lost sight of unity. We've lost the sight of the fact that both conservatives and Democrats want the same thing. They want family, they want health, they want money, they want a job, and they want to live in freedom. And I think what you're doing is beautiful. I was doing a little bit of research on you, and I understand that you had some work, like you were saying, at Capitol Hill, where you were working on funding for breast cancer research and et cetera.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that? Maybe who you were working with and how that came about?
Yeah. So I'll talk about I'll call it my regular job, because I have this passion that I do on the side with this women's health. But I also am the director of corporate affairs for the largest hospice really in the Southeast now. So I work in end of life care as their director of corporate affairs, which means I do a lot of time at my own state house, which is what Advocacy Day was the other day, talking about end of life care and home health care. So that sort of also, that's my background. That's been my career for many years. So me speaking then about women's health doesn't come as such a far stretch after having been diagnosed with breast cancer. But as far as the women's health bills that when I was up at Capitol Hill and on our nation's capital, we were talking about wanting women, especially low income women, to be able to have funding and be able to get things like mammograms and early detection. And the reason for that is early detection is so incredibly important with any kind of cancer. But 1 in 8 women are diagnosed with breast cancer. So if you look at, we'll say low income, if you're looking at low income, which tend to be more of the African American group, which has a higher rate of getting breast cancer and dying from breast cancer anyway, and then they're getting diagnosed later, you can see really where the trouble and the problem comes in. And then what ends up happening is it's absolutely heartbreaking. You have women that go, let's take a typical African American woman, let's say she's low income. She does get the opportunity to go get a mammogram, and they say, we do see something, but you're going to need a diagnostic. And then what happens is she doesn't have the funds or the insurance that's going to cover the diagnostic. So the diagnostic is more than a mammogram. You're actually going to go through and have the ultrasound done, probably under your arm, to see if there are any lymph nodes, if they see anything, or if it's spread. My insurance thankfully covered all of that for me. But if you take the scenario that I just gave, which we see lots and lots of women this happening to, she does not have the funds, or nor does she have the insurance to cover that. So what she does is she goes home and waits it out. And we all know what happens if you have cancer and you wait it out. So she goes home thinking, the doctor's seen something, I probably have breast cancer, but there's nothing that I can do for it. So she dies. She dies either, what happens is she goes back when she's so bad that then something picks up for her to be able to go in and have those things paid for. And then she has treatments, but the treatments do nothing because she's already stage 4 metastatic at that time. So you can see there's a real problem there, and where our legislature really needs to get behind women and pass these bills so that we're not just going at the doctor when we have metastatic breast cancer, that we're able to do that much, much sooner. So that's what I've really been fighting for. And that's really what Susan G. Komen has been fighting for. So that was our big deal on Capitol Hill. And that is something that is actually being passed. So we're very excited about that.
So now, Christy, what does that piece of legislation that you're putting forth look like? That to me is mind blowing. That's that scenario there. And James and I, we're Canadian. We come from a little bit different healthcare.
Yes.
We pay through the nose, subpar, at least in my opinion, here in Canada. You can see James shaking his head, liberally disapproving of my view of our Canadian healthcare. But that is the banter that is Soaring.
Because there is no one who doesn't have availability to mammograms in Canada.
100%.
That's why.
100%.
That's why I'm shaking my head.
But that's my question, Christy, is that piece of legislation that you folks are putting together now, what does that look like? Because again, I know as a conservative, I have family members that are physicians in the States, one specifically in Richmond, Virginia, left Canada during the brain drain in the 90s, went down there to practice because our Canadian system was capping them at $300,000 a year gross. Now you got to take a secretary, you got to take rent, heat, hydro, you want to buy some, paper for the bed. That's all coming out of that $300,000. He had 5 children. It was getting tight for a doctor in Canada. He goes down to Richmond, Virginia, and it's a free for all. He was getting chickens. Guys were paying him chickens. It's crazy. To us, that's a weird dichotomy where here everyone gets, their healthcare. We're gonna call it free, but it ain't free, baby. It is taxed to hell. But what does that legislation that you passed here recently look like to try to service that?
So that's a bill that we needed both the Senate and the Congress to pass, and that's something that's going through now. That they've reviewed it. When I was up there, they were actually reviewing it. We were asking them to sign on. We needed somebody to sponsor it, and Congressman Joe Wilson was South Carolina was behind it, and so. We were asking them to both be behind it and then hopefully pass it. And that's one of the ones that hopefully will be passed. It looks like it's going to. We just got the news, I think, yesterday about that with Susan G. Komen. But what that looks like is that women will be able to go to the doctor if they are diagnosed with something like that. They'll have the means, they'll have the insurance, they'll have the way for them to then go on to have a diagnostic done. At that point, I can tell you from my standpoint, I have wonderful insurance, and I still paid a lot of money for my cancer treatments. I had 4 rounds of chemo, and chemo is about $40,000 a round. That's on the low end. So you can imagine for somebody who doesn't have something like that, this type of legislation is going to allow them to be able to go in and have those diagnostic and then have treatment. So it's a really, really big thing for lower income families, which, like I said, the majority of those that we see are being affected are the African-American women. And those women are the ones that are dying at much, much higher rates, are being diagnosed and dying from breast cancer. So this is a very big thing. It's a really big deal in the breast cancer community that this is going to be passed.
I think it's absolutely amazing because everything I've heard is you should be getting checked quite often. And so maybe you could go over, because like you're saying, in the States, you can't just go in and get a mammogram. You have to pay for that. Like, fortunately in Canada, you can do that. But so when should a woman go in? Because there are so many variants. Like, I originally thought it's a lump. Men get them too. Like, so men should be checking as well.
Men
so you guys know, men are supposed to check. You're supposed to check for lumps. But
I try to check as many as I can.
Your own.
I'm doing my part.
Your own. Oh. Your own. Stop it. We have a guest.
Terrible.
But there are other factors besides lump that I've just recently learned that people ignore because they don't realize that it might be a form of breast cancer. Can you go over some of those just so we can?
So I'm actually really, really glad that you brought up the men thing, because I had this wonderful lady. It was so sweet. There were hundreds of us at Advocacy Day for Susan G. Komen. And because I spoke the very next day when we went up to the Capitol, a lot of people that were there were coming up and talking to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, I had my crown and my staff." So, that always draws people that they want to let me see it. And so I was able to talk to these really amazing women. And one lady there came up and said, one thing that people never say is they never talk about men having breast cancer. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I never thought about that. Just kind of having a conversation with her. And she said, my husband died from breast cancer. Wow. And it was just she was so wonderful and so sweet. And I just loved her passion because she wanted her husband's legacy to live on. And we always talk about women with breast cancer, but she wanted to make sure that he was not left out and that men aren't left out, because it absolutely does happen.
Is it very rare?
More so than women. I mean, 1 in 8 are going to be diagnosed with it for women, but it absolutely does happen. And more, I think you're seeing it a little bit more and more. I mean, my personal, certainly not a doctor. Nobody wants me to take care of them. But I can tell you that you absolutely, I think there's much more environmental things going on. I mean, you
Yeah.
hear things from the food we eat and what is processed. You hear it about, I spray that Bath and Body Works stuff all the time on me. And then I keep thinking like I'm breathing this in,
Yep.
it is everything. And so that's very scary. I mean, I think about it now every time I light a candle in my house. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not, you're not supposed to breathe these toxins in. And it's even laundry detergent. I mean, if we could all go back to like the way things were when there were no, things you were putting in your laundry detergent, everything was, pure and all that, we would see, I feel, a massive drop in cancers across the board. But as far as to answer your question on what you can do, so you're supposed to have your first mammogram as a woman, at least in the United States, you're supposed to have it at 40. And I personally feel like you are going to see the age drop on that because we are seeing so many women diagnosed in their 20s and in their 30s. And what happens with women who have not had a mammogram is they're dying. I mean, I know a girl that passed away in her early 20s from this. That is more rare, but we are seeing it more and more and more because you're not having those mammograms at that age. But I will also tell you that mammograms are not the end all be all. I mean, after all, I had a very slow growing, they said, and mine was already at stage 3. So they feel that they missed that on that first year mammogram that I had. And that the second year, I went in having felt a lump and said, hey, I think that this is something going on. I certainly didn't think it was breast cancer. I was like, oh, whatever. And then they were able to see it. So who knows if I hadn't felt it, if the mammogram the second time would pick it up. So you're supposed to do your checks once a month. You're supposed to have a mammogram at least once a year by the time you're 40. If you have dense breast tissue, you should have them more often, and you should ask for a diagnostic. It is extremely important for women who have dense breast tissue that they ask for a diagnostic. That is an ultrasound that they, after they do the mammogram, then they have the ultrasound and they kind of wave it over you like when you're having a baby, and they'll go under your arms and they can see more in the tissue. For women that have had breast augmentations, you should still do the exact same things. And sometimes it can be harder to detect when you've had a breast augmentation. So, but you want to be really diligent. You have to be your best advocate for things like this. If you feel like something's wrong, keep pressing for doctors to do more and to look more, because if you're your best advocate for sure.
I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for sharing all that. And it is very important that you do. Same with men with prostates. It's around 40.
Absolutely.
You have to start getting those tests, and you really should. It is so important because it happens so fast. Like you said, it was a year. You had the test done, saw nothing. A year later, it was there.
It was there.
It is very fast. So the moment that you notice something, you should go find out, because that's how you survive cancer, is by knowing right away. So you started this, and I love the blonde bombshell. You started this even before you were the blonde bombshell, the Mrs. American, correct? And you had this rare opportunity of drawing on other people's stories. Was there any of those stories, like the story? Like, so there's been a few people through Soaring Profits, because I'm kind of I believe in motivating people and telling stories like yours, and, reaching out to people and going, hey, if you are alone, if you need to talk to someone, DM me. I will be there. I will be your one person. I'm not going to save your life or anything, but, we'll chat. Tell me your story and I'll listen. And I will tell you everything I can tell you to help you out. So I've had those moments that make me want to keep on going. Do you remember a moment when you're like, gosh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is why God put me on the earth. I feel it because you mentioned that was the first inspiration to keep you going.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. So I think it was as I was doing the blog and I had people reaching out to me, and at first it was just like a few people that had asked me like little questions. I remember one blog post I did was about something called the chemo mouthpiece. And I had gotten in touch with the company because I was like frantic about these mouth sores everybody kept talking about. I mean, to me, that was like the worst thing. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna lose my hair. I'm gonna have these mouth sores. Like, what in the world, And so this company, I Googled it, and it was like, it looks like a football mouthpiece that is
Yeah.
frozen. It's got this frozen thing on the end of it, and you look ridiculous. And I emailed them and I was like, what is this? I'm about to do this like aggressive chemo. And they said, let us send you one. And I was like, really? And they were like, yeah. I was like, I'll pay. And they're like, no. If you give us a review, we'll send it to you. So I was like, yeah. So they sent it to me, and y'all, I mean, I wish I had a picture. Thank God COVID was going on, because the pictures I probably would have had. I was in the chemo chair, and didn't want to lose my hair. And so they were like, well, you can use this thing called the Dignity cap, which is a frozen head cap. Okay. Y'all picture Amelia Earhart. Okay.
Yes.
Picture that
Yeah,
thing. Okay. And it has
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's not funny, but it is funny.
That
the way
is
you're
just
telling it.
the best way you could put that. Amelia Earhart.
Oh, just wait. Y'all met me, so you know like what this must have been like, okay?
Yeah.
So it's got a hose hooked to it if it's not bad enough, okay? And so your hair's like, they got this cap, this Amelia Earhart cap on you, and it's got this hose coming out, and it's pumping into the like cap this freezing cold water. So much so it was like massive headache. You're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And in the meantime, I'm sitting here in this chair. I'm the only one, by the way, because nobody else apparently cares.
Right.
And they're like, I'm never wearing this thing. So I've got this on. I've got this football mouthpiece in my mouth.
Look in, coach.
That is also
I'm ready.
frozen. That's also frozen, by the way. So much so that nurses, the oncology nurses, were coming by and they were like, what is that? And I can't talk. So I'm like, and they're like, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm sitting here. There's like 50 other people with me in these chairs. And I will tell you what, though, I did not lose all my hair, and I didn't get a single mouth sore. So I won in the end.
I love that.
But it was those moments. It was those moments that people were like, what is this thing? And, that I was like, I'm crazy enough to try these things. So I think it were those moments. I think it was we as women, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to have moments that you're going through something, that there's humor. It was okay. I mean, my whole blog has like these ridiculous humor things in there about things I thought about or things I went through, things I asked. And so I think there were those moments that I was like, we're all living this. If there's 1 in 8 of us that are going to get breast cancer, why is no one talking about it? And why are we only talking about it from the standpoint of diagnosis? What happens once you're a survivor? Because pre-cancer me is a very different person than post-cancer me. And I think those were the moments that I was like, women need to know that it is okay to want to thrive. It's okay to want to feel beautiful again. It's okay to want to feel whole again. And it's okay to reinvent yourself. Those were the moments that I was like, that's why I'm here. That's why God has me where I'm supposed to be at. And apparently that's why I won the crown, because no one else knows why.
No, I think it's such an interesting thing. And Kristy, when we first met you, like this banner up here, unveiling the stories of champions, that's what Soaring Profits has been all about. Like, we love having these conversations with people that have done amazing, wonderful, very unique things. And, when we had an opportunity to talk with you, you see this, you've been a beautiful woman. You've been passionate about things all your life. But when this hit, it seemed like, after our conversation, it seemed like that was like a guiding light. It was like this light on the hill. I'm going to point towards it. I'm going to run towards it. Mm-hmm. You've done all the stuff with the hospice stuff. Like, you've been a professional all your life. And now this is adding to that. But when you get that diagnosis, you have that, like James said, that hit the knee moment. Mm-hmm. When someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to shake your hand. Maybe he's a president, who knows? But when they shake your hand and they say, thank you, I appreciate what you're doing. And you've went through the trials to that triumph where you are now. What does that do to you? What is that feeling like when somebody comes along? And you had that woman, but my husband died of breast cancer. You've had other families that I lost, my wife, I lost my sister, I lost my whoever. When they come to you and say,
Mhm.
thank you for what you're doing, what does that feel like?
It's extremely humbling. I've been given way more than I've ever given, meaning that the people I have come in contact with are usually ones that have lost somebody, or they tell me this incredible journey that they were on that is far worse than mine was. And those are the moments that I just soak in what they have to say, because I feel like I'm the one that's getting from them. Working in hospice care is the same exact way. Being able to talk with people who are at the end of life journey, it's the same type of thing. I am so humbled that I get to be one of the last people that they have spoken with, or that our company at Agape Care Group is able to help them in a transition into that. And so those types of things are extremely, extremely humbling.
Mhm.
And it makes me feel just so thankful that I was chosen to do that, and that I was given this platform. I would never choose breast cancer. I would never have
Yes.
chosen it at all. But
Yeah.
having gone through it, I am so humbled that I've been given what I've been given and that I can give back. I mean, whether or not if it's a laugh, whether or not it's helping somebody,
Yeah.
or whether or not it's listening to somebody else's story, it is absolutely humbling, and it just is unbelievable that I always feel like God picked me. Like, who am I? And
Yeah.
that it's those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of the imposter syndrome. I feel it every once in a while too when people like tell me their story and or they share something with me and want my advice, or they're not sure what direction to go, so they want, some sort of idea of what should be next steps for them. And you kind of feel like who the hell am I? Like I am a
Yes.
firm believer in God, and I think God put me in front of everyone. Like but God put me in front of you so I could share your story with the people that I know that need to hear
Yeah.
it. God put me with Pat. Pat and I are like brothers. Uh, Even though he's wrong all the time with his conservative views, uh, I still love the man.
Not tonight. 2 against 1, pal.
And you talk a lot about your faith and how
Mhm.
that faith rises you above. And I think that it's so important because both Pat and I are very faithful. And I think that every person that I walk in front of, every time I walk down the street and I stop to talk to a random stranger, it's because God's directing me to. And and I try my best to listen, even when I don't want to. Because every once in a while
Mhm.
there's someone that you don't want to help. And you're
Yeah.
like, "God, okay, I'm gonna do it, but I don't wanna."
Yeah.
Maybe you talk a little bit about your faith story, because when we were talking in Orlando, that was one of the things that I was drawn to you, is that your faith kinda held you up like a pillar. It was such a beautiful thing the way you talked about it. And so maybe
Oh.
tell us a little bit about that and how it helped you.
Yeah, so I've always been a faithful person. I grew up a Christian. I had a wonderful
Mhm.
family that always led me in that way. And college at the University of South Carolina was really where, I had that moment with God where I just everything clicked. And so I have been fortunate that God has always been a part of my life, and I've always felt very drawn to speak about my faith, to talk about Him. And then this was no different. And we talked about, did I ever have a hit your knee moment? And what's funny is that my hit my knee moment did not come at diagnosis. Mine came as a survivor. And it was kind of
Wow.
what you're talking about, kind of that imposter syndrome, or PTSD, those types of things that you get.
Yeah.
When I found out I was diagnosed, my exact words to my family was, well, all right, I'm going to handle this with grace. And
Yeah.
I knew it was this overwhelming that only God could have put in me. I mean, there's no way I had the strength to do
I
that on
agree.
my own. And so it became this, I need to show my daughter what it's like if she's ever diagnosed with anything. I need to show my son what it's like for women to be strong and go through something. And when he has somebody, so I needed to show them that, and it was this overwhelming feeling of that, and I needed to point that God was the one that was doing this in me. And so in that, I was constantly reminded of the David and Goliath story, because I felt very much like God is never going to put Goliath in front of you without a stone. And that is, that was my slay the dragon or slay the giant moment for me, as I was going through this. So I was walking with God and I was very confident, and I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And that's how I was every time. And then I went in I was done with chemo, and I had 25 rounds of radiation. And I walked in for my last appointment, going through chemo and things. And I sat there with my oncologist, and he walked in and he said, okay, great, you're done. And then he looked at me and he goes, go live life. And it was that moment that I went, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, I was like, whoa. Life for the last however long has been chemo, apparently looking like Amelia Earhart. And, and then, you know, whether or not my skin was being burned, you know, this is what my life was. And
Right.
chemo became a safety net for me. Chemo was like, well, that I know it's poison going in my body, but it's keeping the cancer away. That's how I was thinking about it. So I walked out, I was by myself, and I walked out of that oncologist office and I burst into tears. That was my hit my knee moment, because I was like, God, where are you? Where are you? You've been with me through this whole thing, but I don't know how to go live my life. I don't know how to be the girl post cancer. I'm the girl with cancer. And so those were the moments that my faith played a huge role. That is when the blog was really started kicking off. That was when I decided to do Mrs. South Carolina, because it was like, it gave me something else. And it was the moment, and I will talk about this. I don't always mention this, and I think it's extremely important. It was the moment I realized I needed more help. And what I meant by that was I was having so much anxiety as a survivor that I needed anti-anxiety medication to help me. And people don't want to talk about that because they think that that's taboo. But when you're going through something, whether or not it's a diagnosis or something in your life, do not be afraid to ask for help. It was the difference of me being up at 2 a.m, Googling WebMD because my elbow hurt and I was convinced that the cancer was in my bones, to me sleeping at night.
Right.
Yeah.
Those were the hit the knee moments for me. And those were the things that I was like, no one talks about this. No one tells cancer survivors that they are going to, when they walk in for their appointments every 3 months afterwards, that smell of that place that you sat in for your chemo is going to make you want to run out the door. Or somebody telling you to go live your life, you're going to go, I don't even know what that is. Who am I? Who am I now? And so I think those are the moments that were so impactful for me. And that's where my faith really came into play. And then I wrote the children's book, which is called Finding the David Within, and it's about to be published. And that was because I knew that I found the David within me to fight that giant, the giant of cancer in front of me. And so I'm just so thankful, because if I hadn't had my faith, I don't know where I would be. And I feel bad for those that don't, because that is such a, and I have no doubt that the moments that I've had with the president, with Susan G. Komen, with Moms for America, and Jesus himself, Jim Caviezel, those moments were because God. I mean, that's it. That it's because of him. It's not anything I've done. I would love to say, hey, here's the secret recipe to how I did this, but it's God.
Yeah, Christy, I cannot tell you enough how those moments, exactly what you're talking about, and you know, whether they're hit the knee or not, just knowing, having that spiritual relationship, that faithful relationship, that what's going to be is going to be. Like we live in a world that is completely about everything that I can control. I'm a finance guy. I'm a business guy. I watch little lines on charts all day long. Like, it's the most boring thing, and I can't control any of it, right? None of it can I wave a wand and make happen. But it's an amazing thing when you have that relationship, that understanding in your own faith, where you can be like, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm comfortable with that. You can have the darkest hour of your life. It can be beyond. And you can sit there and be like, I put my trust in you. And it's a powerful thing. And whether that is faith, whether that, you know, hey, I believe in Jesus, that's mine. Some people go out and they want to hug a tree. That's theirs. Each their own, right? Like whatever you want to do.
Right.
But you have to have something. And these people that they don't understand and they don't get it, I often go to what is the moment? What's going to be the moment that's going to bring you there? Because it's going to happen. And some people run away from it. And I don't know if it's a fear or if it's a control aspect or what it is, but that moment, it's so powerful and it can be so impactful and for everyone around you. And Kristy, thank you so much for sharing that, because that is, in today's society, that's not a popular opinion. And all too often we see, beautiful women like yourself that are far too worried about, and it was a question I was going to ask you, your political views, your Christian views, those are things that, in today's cancel culture that end up a big X above some people's heads. And you've embraced them. You've made them a staple of who you are and that personality that you are. And we fell in love with you when we first met you. You are this ray of sunshine. You light up a room. You bring such personality and charisma to everything that you do. It's been an amazing journey, but maybe you can speak a little bit about that. Have you ran into any of the cancel culture environment within your work? And how does one handle that in your line of work?
Yeah. So it's funny you would say that. I talked a little bit about that at the Moms for America thing. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows as Mrs. American. I was told many times that I was off-brand. And I wear that badge proudly. That was one of the things. I have no doubt that I am completely different than any woman that has been a Mrs. American in the past. I have no doubt. They're all wonderful. I've met them. They're fantastic. And the current one is wonderful too. And I am completely different than all of them. I've always kind of gone to the beat of my own drum. I know who I am. I'm proud of who I am. And I don't like for people to tell me I have to be a certain brand. And I think that's probably why I was never in pageants. I think, and I don't want to generalize everybody. It's a broad brush to paint with, but they kind of toe the line. If you want something, you toe the line. And I've never been like that. And you know what? I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I know that. But I wore that crown, and I did a heck of a lot of work and a lot of time spent. I got to even go to Walter Reed Hospital here, which is the big Army hospital for the wounded warriors. And I spoke with women there that had cancer. I mean, it was absolutely, talk about humbling. And we're talking about women who are not going to survive. So to have those moments, and I walk in with a crown on my head and I just wanted to rip it off and put it on theirs, because trust me, there's nothing more humbling than that. But I was definitely an off-brand queen, we'll say. And I wore that proudly, and people didn't like that. And I was aware of that. I knew when I went back and I was to give up my crown that year, and I was told that I could not be political. I could not say the word Jesus in my farewell address. Wow. And I could not have scripture. And so I did none of those, meaning I didn't follow their rules. So I'm not a rule follower. And I don't say that as like people shouldn't be, but there are certain things that you don't concede on. And for me,
and so if I can just dig into that a little bit more, is that we hear from so many people that, people say Christianity's under attack, and people go, oh, Christians. Oh, right. Like, oh, you've had it so good for like 500 years, now what? Right. But when you as a public figure are being told you cannot bring this up, that like, this is not that you're representing, Adidas today and you're doing a fashion shoot. This is about who you are, your personality, your skill set, and your traits.
Yeah.
And if you're not allowed to talk about one of your traits, that seems very off-brand.
It was, and I was all for that. The brand is not going to have a political view, or the brand is not going to have a religious view. I'm all for that. Right? That's fine. I don't own the company. They can do that. But when you crown somebody, and I had to think, if I was a different religion, I won't mention any others, but if I was a different religion, would they have told me that? And I don't think they would have. I think it's because I was a Christian. And, here's the thing. They are more than welcome to do whatever they want. But when I say goodbye and I crown somebody else and it's my farewell address, for me not to thank God, or for me not to, I could thank God. I couldn't thank Jesus as my Lord and Savior, or my exact words. And I had a problem with that. I had a problem with that because I was giving up the crown that I had held for a year, and that is part of who I am. In fact, it's the most important part of who I am. And if I was good enough to represent the brand, and I was good enough to be a queen and go to all these things and be a good queen representing their brand, then they certainly could allow me to be myself. I did toe the line on the political things. I wasn't out campaigning. I didn't, go to certain things or whatever. But I certainly also didn't hide who I was. And then right afterwards, I haven't hidden going to Mar-a-Lago or anything else. And so, yeah, there definitely is a cancel culture, even in the pageant world of things. But if someone's going to cancel me, or they don't want me to come speak, it wasn't meant for me anyway. And I cannot say that God has led me this whole way and that I am right here where I'm supposed to be because of him, and know that firmly, and then think he's going to leave me now. I mean, this is, if I can survive cancer, this is easy for him. And I like to think that, sometimes we walk through fire. This is my next Goliath. If somebody wants to cancel me, that's fine. I'll just get invited to Mar-a-Lago. That's the way I feel about it. I don't need to go up to Delaware. I'll just head on down to Florida, and I'm good with that. I really am. And and I try very much to be respectful of people, and respectful of religions and politics and whatnot. But I'm not gonna shy away from who I am, for myself, but also for my children. I think it's important. I think it's very important that we show who we are, and we can be united and have civil discourse, and we can talk about things. But when one side starts to not be able to speak, but another side can, that's where I'm off brand, and I'm proud to wear that badge. So
I 100% agree. I know it's one of the things I love about you, Christy, is because you and I may disagree. Pat and I may disagree, and that's okay. As long as we can talk about it and be respectful.
That's right.
I don't know why we lost this idea that we can't have a conversation. Like, I talk to my daughter all the time. We're on, like, even though I'm liberal, she's like way more liberal than me. And we have disagreements. We have flat out arguments where we raise our voice, and at the end of the day, we love each other and we respect each other.
Absolutely.
And it's okay for us to disagree.
Yeah, part of my thing is I miss the days that you could talk to people. Like, I like debating things, and that doesn't mean I don't love you at the end of it. But I'm never going to walk away and be like, oh, I'm never going to talk to that person. That's just not me. But I have had people do that to me. Yes. And those are the things that I'm like, what has happened in this world that we can't have different views? We're all different. We all see things differently. And I think it's crazy that we're not living in the world that we used to. And I miss that.
Well, that's where Pat and I started. Pat and I would be in bars, and we would be having these heated discussions where we were on opposite sides. We would be literally standing on the table, pounding it, yelling at each other. And we'd gather a group. A group would come around, and they would be on my side or they'd be on his side. And, we'd have these arguments. And then Pat and I would be like, you want a shot? We'll go get a shot, buddy. And I pat him on the back and give each other a hug. But everyone else is still like crying and angry, and they don't know how to let go after. Like, I will still love this man forever, even though he's wrong. Like, it's okay. and the problem is if we don't have these discussions, all we have is discourse. All we have is division. And that's the problem right now in Canada, in the States. We are so busy working on division instead of we need money. We have homeless people. We have a drug problem. Obviously, people don't have enough health care. These are all the problems that we all have. Everybody. Absolutely. I don't care what you believe in. Everyone has these problems, and this is what we need to be working on. And if we could just discuss LGBT, if we could just discuss how we deal with stuff in our schools, if we could just discuss, without arguing and accusing people about guns, if we could just discuss it, I think we would come into a middle location that we could all be happy with. But we're so saying that, you guys are racist. That's the first go-to every time. I've been called racist.
I know.
I'm the farthest thing from racist there is, and so is my buddy Pat. He's not.
That's
a racist
what racists say.
Go ahead, Pat. You go ahead.
I'm the most
You know what racists say? I'm not
right?
racist. Yeah, that's terrible. That's
Yeah.
terrible. Kristy.
Anyway, I just want to say we're getting close to that hour. Probably people have turned us off because you guys are way too conservative and they don't like listening to other people's ideas. Yeah, they don't like listening to other people's ideas, but I love it. And you know what? When we met in Orlando, there were so many people wanting your attention. I had a very short time talking with you, and I fell in love with you because I think you're such an eloquent speaker. You're a beautiful woman. You have thrown yourself on so many important topics to advocate for. And then you have this beautiful religious side of you that you're not afraid to share. And that story of David, I believe in firmly. And my personal story, I have two. My personal story, the one is that the story about walking on the beach, and there's two sets of footprints, and then there's one because Jesus carried me.
Yes.
And then there's another one that's not quite that. It's this young girl is walking on the beach and she's throwing starfish. And every time she throws a starfish, 50 more starfish get poured back on the beach. And this old man comes up and goes, you're not making a difference. 50 starfish just came back in. And the little girl picks up a starfish and throws it back in the water and says, I made a difference to that starfish. And you are making difference to many starfish. And I love that about you. And I want to thank you for coming on our show and making a difference to our people, our profiteers out there, because I know they got a lot from this. Even if they disagree with you on the small stuff, the important stuff is that we get together and we work together, and you're helping everyone. Like, you're going in changing laws. We can sit here and we can argue and we can debate about all this other silly stuff, but you're going to change laws for everybody. Not just for the people you agree with. You're changing laws for everybody. And I love that about you. Profiteers out there, thank you for joining us for another amazing show. We got some more great shows coming up. We got some exciting stuff. We're going to do some more live stuff, just like we did in Orlando with this wonderful woman. So please check us out. Stay tuned. And let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Patrice.
Kristy, again, James, killed it. How can I wrap up with anything less than starfish, right? Like, what a great one. But
right,
Kristy, it's a pleasure. You always kill it. You're a fantastic guest, and please keep doing what you're doing. It's beautiful work. It's God's work, and you do it so beautifully and with such dignity and poise. I appreciate everything you're doing. This is that time in the show where we always say that there's no gotcha questions, and then we give you a gotcha question at the end. So get ready. Put your tiara on. Yeah. So our guests always wrap up our show with giving a word of wisdom to someone out there. So whether it's somebody that's struggling, somebody maybe that wants to become, the next Miss America, Mrs. American, whatever that looks like, leave them with a message of inspiration. Go.
All right. So I will go with one of my favorite Bible verses in the story of Esther, where she says, or they actually say to her, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And I think we all have that moment in our lives where we know we were born for such a time as this. And maybe it's a pageant. Maybe it's changing lives. Maybe it's doing something like a podcast or writing a blog. But whatever it is, we all have something. And so I would just encourage you to absolutely do it and don't let anything stand in your way, because you absolutely were born for such a time as this.
Killed it.
Of course you did. It's her.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.